So yesterday I got to check out Aquaman. So kind of give you some backstory. For me, Aquaman is interesting. I'm a big DC fan. I like the comics. I like reading, reading about Batman and kind of the Batman universe. And also I like reading about Flash. And so I've always really liked those. Also, I've liked the TV shows. I've been a fan of Green Arrow for a pretty long time. Watched kind of the Flash shows. Watched a lot of the different stuff they've made, and really have loved them for the most part. There's sometimes I'm not as big fans, but for me the cinematic universe has been a mix. I don't think there's I think there's only one movie that ever really hit for me, and that was Wonder Woman. I really enjoyed Wonder Woman, and I think it could really compete with kind of the Marvel cinematic universe, as we say. Um, but the other films have been interesting. There have been some bombs that have been like, you should never have made that. Like the Suicide Squad is a perfect example. Been some good tries, but they just still have not hit the mark. I think the best example of that is Justice League. Is like I should really love this on paper. And I should love what you're doing. You're providing some of the best Batman that I've ever seen, but it still is a movie that I have it on Amazon and I completely don't want to watch it again. And so it's sad that these movies have not hit the mark for me. But so going into this movie, I had pretty low expectations. Like, oh, I know it's going to be a decent movie because most of the critics have been about 75 to 80. So I was like, oh, this will do all right. Um, I think honestly, it really did hit my expectation. Like it blew my expectations out of the water. I would say this is probably maybe one of my favorite DC movies. I would say maybe even go, you know, is as good as Wonder Woman, and I think it could definitely beat some of the early Marvel movies as like an introduction to characters. I like kind of some of the stories. I think it's very heartfelt. I like the story of his dad, Aquaman's dad, and Aquaman's mom, Atlanta. I really find that story really cool. I like how Atlanta kind of went off on her own to protect, kind of her son and her husband, and I think that was really cool, and how she kind of found love, even though she was forced to be in a arranged marriage, and there's some really cool type stuff, and how she's kind of like a fighter, and so they provided some really interesting characters, and so I liked kind of that heart, that the heart behind that, like seeing his dad kind of wait at the docks for her mother and all that. Kind of going into like Aquaman the character, I think he's a very fun character. Like I really like some of the places that I've seen him. I like the brashness of Aquaman because that's not what you really suspect from Aquaman. Like if you read like when I think about Aquaman as a character, is I don't see this very brash type character that Jason Momoa played perfectly. He this character that he plays is very much a sailor, born on the seas, had that hard life, and it's very different. And I like that. I like that they give us something very different than what we're used to. And so, kind of moving forward, basically the plot of the story is he has to become king to save Atlantis to prevent this big war. Um, this big war that was going to, the Atlantis was going to bring a war on to Earth, onto all the planets of the Earth. It's definitely at the heart of it. It's a very Aquaman story, which is cool. And I think that's what made the movie pretty cool. It played to some of the interesting parts of it. I found like Atlantis real fascinating. Like when they were going through the city, when they were doing the big fight, the firefight, all that type of stuff. I think it's really cool. I think it really surprised a lot of people, showing that there's more depth to Aquaman. Because I was having the conversation with my wife about it. She didn't know that there was like an Atlantis type story within Aquaman. So it's really cool that they kind of gave this narrative. Um, I think they kind of forced kind of this trident. You have to find the trident, and that would unite all the people. It was almost like watching like Lord of the Rings or something like that. And so there is some forcedness in terms of that, but I think there was some charm. And so I like how beautiful it was, like whether it was Atlantis or whether it's going to Italy. I thought the Italy's um, any scenes with like the fight within in Italy or just Italy in general, I thought it was real beautiful. They did a really good job just using good cinematics in that. And so it's cool. Like basically, what happens is he goes to Atlantis. He gets beat by his brother. They go on this voyage to find the the Trident. They go to the Sahara, and that sends them to Italy. And then in Italy, they go into the notes of the trenches, and so they kind of make their way through all the different peoples of Atlantis, and they meet their mother, and then he gets the trident, and then um, he defeats the big bad monster, which he then teams, and then they go into this big gigantic war that they were try to get combine all the forces of Atlantis, and so it was really interesting. I like I think once again I liked all the different characters they provided. I think Jason Momoa was awesome. Myrna, is it Mira? I think she was a pretty cool character. I think you guys have. I think there's enough to do a second one of these. We'll see if they'll do it or not, because there's a lot of questions. Is this universe still alive after Shabam? I think my final thoughts and the thoughts that I was having at the end of this movie was, I wish, and I know they couldn't do this. I just wish we had a Wonder Woman movie, then an Aquaman movie, and then a Shabam movie, and to have a lot of these small movies like Marvel did, and then finally, after a couple of these movies, make your Justice League movie. And I think if they had done that, I think there would have been a lot more resonation. Because if they definitely had going from Wonder Woman to Aquaman, I think you would have a lot more stuff. Because this movie does not need the Justice League, and actually, I think um, it being around the DC universe makes it more like hokkier. Like there were some mentions like, yeah, he was like the feeder of the big bad in Justice League, and then there also were like, I think the most hokkiest moment was like at the end, they're like, I am Aquaman, and it's like, okay, you've definitely hit the hokey spot, but it is what it is. So those were my kind of my thoughts about it. Go watch it. If you're kind of still on the border of the fence, I'm sorry that I gave spoilers. Although there's not a lot to really spoil in this movie, other than Atlanta lives, his mom lives, which was cool to see. The most heartfelt moment of this entire movie was when Atlanta finally goes back to her husband, and that almost made me cry. It just definitely had the tears, the moments. But once again, it's not as bad as it was. Just kind of give you my thoughts about it. All right. Hope you have a good day and good time. If you like this video, like it. Subscribe to my channel. I'm always going to do more of these movie reviews if I find them interesting, or if I have something really to talk about these movies.